Huw, we're live.
Hello, Shawn.
How's it going?
I was just burping then as we went live. Apologies.
I'm
great, mate. How are you?
I think the burp is very on brand for us again. I think if we were to start professionally, there'd be an issue. We'd have fans walking out.
I mean, this is why we've got those 10, 11 subscribers, mate. This is what they tune in for.
12. We got another one this week.
Oh, boom! Look at that.
Yeah.
Hey,
we're getting a nice little base of followers here. So for this week, for anybody who is tuning in or is going to be tuning in or watching posthumously, we are reviewing something that we've been talking about sort of here and there, off and on. And I think we decided that I was going to make the commitment to watch The Social Dilemma, and it was something that I needed to take some time away to do. It's been a stressful month, and that's the type of show that I didn't want to invest in for a little while, and I'm glad we did. It really made me think quite a bit about my usage. I thought the first thing we could do will be jump in and look at a preview or a trailer from the actual show to jog your memory. So let's cue it up. Trailer for The Social Dilemma. I'm just going to talk as if it's a seamless transition, and action.
When you go to Google and type in climate change
There it is. So it's a great trailer, actually, having seen it after the fact.
No,
and this, so what I noticed before I started watching this, there was actually somebody on my Facebook feed who had very much was not part of the echo chamber on Facebook in the current political climate, but he had sort of get more on camera here. You want to get more of the good stuff. He said that he's watched The Social Dilemma and he's going to be taking time away from the internet, from social media, which I thought was intriguing. And when I watched the show, I had views on, following our conversation on what we discussed, and I think my views were along the line of there's always going to be vices that we have to learn to adjust to as a society. And I think when we spoke about it, my view was, so for instance, processed food is something that we've had to adapt to because it made us ill. It was killing us. So we I think in sort of the 60s, we had more easy food, and we started to see obesity rates going up. When we, smoking early doors, people thought that was healthy. The advancement of Coca-Cola, television and advertising, and many of the things in this documentary do match very well with how advertising's come to fruition. But there were some definite differences with it, with social media being what it is. And I'll be honest, it did have me really looking introspectively at how I use social media. I'm not necessarily worried about me being influenced by that, and I don't think I'm that demographic that's going to be easily influenced. However, I did notice some patterns that surprised me. Now, I know you haven't seen it in a while. What were your what was when you first saw this? What did you think when you finished watching?
I suppose just surprise with the manipulative side of it, and actually how much I fall for that. And I think within that evening, what was really interesting was I was on Facebook because I use Facebook more than any other, and I would like to think it's mainly for business, but actually since watching that, I realized I do a lot of just kind of time wasting on there, like, for or distraction on there. And I saw a post from someone, and I think it may have mentioned me, or it was a comment from me or something, where it was one of those linked ones. And then, so I had viewed that. And then later on in the evening, it said, I had a pop-up notification that so-and-so's mentioned you, or a comment that you're in, someone has commented. I was like, oh, I had seen that already. And yet now later on, it's popped up. I thought it was only for the initial time that would do that. I was like, oh yeah. So that was almost instantly, that same evening, I saw an example of it in use where it's just trying to claw for your attention. So, it was. So again, I put my hands up as someone that uses it. I think I use it far less than a lot of people that I'm aware of, because I try to not get my head stuck in a phone. I'm kind of aware of that, and yet I still fall for some of these things and find myself kind of like flicking, on the occasion, like, oh, what am I doing? I'm just, get off this thing. So yeah, I was taken aback by some of the way it's constructed and how I do unknowingly fall for its efforts.
Yeah, and I I was trying to really qualify what are the positives and negatives after watching this. And the first thing that came to mind after watching it was that my opinion hasn't changed, that the tool is not inherently positive or negative, the internet or social media, or even what the social media companies have done to keep your time on it. Now, for anybody who hasn't seen The Social Dilemma, I would highly recommend it. And they have, and I like this method of writing a documentary. They had a storyline that went with it, with a family trying to negotiate social media. And it was interesting. And there was some things. One, I think you have to put into context too. It's trying to deliver a very specific narrative. So there's some irony in it because it's delivering a very specific message that's only highlighting on the negatives.
One side. Yeah, agreed.
I mean, they do say here or there in bits. All of them did say, look, we thought this thing was going to be, good. And it has, and you heard throughout the film, oh, it has done some good. However, but through it was really highlighting the negatives. And the first thing I thought was this internet optimization, as far as what you like, is really good for porn. I thought for porn, this is the best thing in the world, because if you liked, big boobs and you liked girl on girl, then the internet was going to say, oh, would you like more girl on girl? And for somebody who likes porn, I think it's incredible. Yeah, I think it's an incredible porn tool.
I'd second
now, it's wonderful, because the whole idea that it's bringing up things, and what you highlighted wasn't I don't think it was a social issue, because I get caught in these traps on Facebook specifically. I'll see a video on Facebook, and then Facebook will bring up another video right under it. I found myself 3 hours later looking at videos of nonsense. And then when I hit the 5th Rick Lax video with some stupid magic trick that's just idiotic, I bail. But that's 3 hours later, because I've seen a video, another video I like, and I've just wasted my time. Now, have I, wanted to hurt myself, or have I wanted to join a cult after that? No, I haven't. But the other side of the coin that it highlights, that's changing my point of view from when we first spoke about it, it's just something we need to adapt to, is more to do with young people, more to do with impressionable people, and the fact that we're not preparing people to deal with social media. So the narrative, not so much with the young guy in the film, but with the girl in the film, really struck a nerve with me, because I thought that was a very real thing. And the data on suicides is very real.
It's shocking. Yeah.
And there's this whole culture when you look at like Instagram, or you look at, just people vying for likes, it is going to have a negative mental impact. And for me, more so than keeping you on, I think that's the purpose of every type of media, whether that's television, whether that's radio, even whether that's food. McDonald's wants you to keep coming back and eating more of it. That's natural. But when it comes to people's mental health and how these things affect your mental health, if you've grown up with these things, I think for me, that was an alarming thing. That was the first thing. I mean, did that hit you in any way when you saw that? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. What I found quite interesting, this is just slightly off the social media, but relevant to what we're saying. I'm in a property investment group. I'm in a 12-month program, and there's a couple of what they class as kind of graduates. So there's basically an 18 and a 19-year-old on the course, and they pay less, but they're in between sixth form and uni and trying to learn like a skill. So it's an awesome thing they're doing.
That's great.
But I mean, these girls that I've talked to are fantastic, and they're inspiring and all of these fantastic things. But when you start talking about them and their actions and what they're doing, there's this huge vulnerability underneath them. They lack confidence. They're so worried, really worried about how they come across and how. I was like, who gives a shit? I was like, well, why would you worry about that? And I would kind of talk it, and obviously I'm saying that from someone that's a 38-year-old balding man that's kind of given up on his life. But like, I know what I was like at 18 and 19, and there's that, that kind of self-hate or like that doubt, and you just constantly want the approval of your peers and people around you. So going back to your point now, just to kind of use something more recent that I've kind of noticed, it's just it's so obvious. These people are super switched on. They're like investing in themselves, putting money on the line to try and grow, and they're doing something that's really difficult at 18 and 19. Yet these switched on, driven people have this underlying doubt and a need for approval. So let's just wind that back to when you're 13, 14, or even 11, however young people are on them now. And it's so obvious that when people are liking you, or you've got a photo and people are commenting or not, and I think they're so vulnerable. There's this massively powerful tool that is been purposely designed to tap into our psychology, and it's inadvertently, and in some cases absolutely purposely preying on these vulnerable people, and it's that concerns me. I think your point is right. I think actually my mum, hands down, is addicted to social media without question, and I don't think she's aware of it. But she can't keep off her phone, and I think that's the thing. It's like the guy, that one scene where they basically remove that. Well, if it's not that big a deal, let me just take that phone from you. Like any addiction, let me just take that away from you, and let's see how you cope with that. And the reality is, people cope very badly with it, and so I would attest, like you, I'm someone that probably deals with it a lot better than many other people, and I probably don't fall down the rabbit hole as often. Yet I was still surprised at how often I do, and that couldn't help me think about the more vulnerable people that aren't aware and open, and learn about themselves, that they are really falling into this trap set up by social media.
Yeah. When you think about what life was like when you were a kid, or when I was a kid, it was a different world. And I was trying to put myself in the shoes of a 13-year-old with a phone and Facebook. And I found it really intimidating, knowing what I know now, because now you've got, when you were growing up, you had a break from those social pressures. And now you are 24/7 in those. And you are able to spend your time trying to create, improve your stock value as a person. And that's what you're doing when you're young. You're constantly vying for popularity. This was when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, it was, my life was about working to become popular and become liked, because I was a bigger boy. I didn't have that confidence in myself until I was about 14. 14, I made a decision that I was going to be a confident person. So who I am now is very much built on the, I guess my self-esteem was very much driven by my self-esteem at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, was definitely driven by my, let's say, my weight, being a big guy as a kid before I started playing football. And I would have been on social media constantly trying to find good angles to make sure my tits were less obvious. I would have been trying to get likes from people that were popular, and I would have been.
Your lips.
That's right. Duck
in your
lips.
ass out. Yeah.
That's right. Just showing a little bit of tail. But I would have been living. I think I would have been living for those likes. I mean, to a certain degree, you do. To a lesser extent, now you don't live or die by it. You turn on Instagram, and if you put a photo up and you see a lot of likes, you're like, oh, that feels nice. There's a lot of people that like my photo. When I share a photo, it's so that people back home, and I think this is cool. I want to share this. But there's an element where those likes give you that little hit of dopamine, and
that's the danger.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's everything we do is dopamine, and this is where I had to draw a line on the documentary. Not as far as I don't like it. This is where I draw the line, but this is where I needed to take a step back a bit, because that hit of dopamine is in everything we do, whether that's play sports, whether that's.
I disagree. I wouldn't say it's in everything we do. It's in a lot of modern society, but there's huge chunks of it where we're not, and I think that's where we're at danger, and that's where people are missing out. There's that lack of awareness, and there's actually a lack of want, because it's a driven need. Now people are addicted to being distracted and getting dopamine hits, and I think your generalized point is that it's everywhere. Yeah. Like I kind of it's in so many places, but there are many places where it isn't, that people just don't tend to go there. So that's where I would just kind of push back on you a little bit on that point.
Well, I think when we look at, maybe the dopamine is too specific an example, but if we were to remove the internet and remove social media, we were trying to find those pleasure centers in other areas. We weren't just sitting at home saying, I'm just even reading a book, that we're stimulating those pleasure centers to a lesser degree. So we are constantly looking for engagement.
Yeah. So I kind of did a little bit of research on happiness, and it was saying that you can, one way of, I mean, it's a very complicated thing to look at actually, but one of the ways that you can look at it is just the chemical side of it. And the dopamine hit is highly addicted, and that's when people get addicted to things like drugs or social media or have other addictions, is because it is in line with that part of your brain. And the thing is, it's fleeting, so it's highly addictive. You sought after it, but and when you don't have it, you want it, like any addiction. But it goes very quickly. It comes and goes. And the type of chemicals that we want to have more of for natural, longer lasting happiness are serotonin, and oxytocin. And both of which you can get more serotonin from how you eat and gut health and that type of thing, because I think 90% of your serotonin comes from your gut. But from oxytocin, the greatest thing is human contact, and that's human touch and human connection. So whatever it is that you do, your club, your sport, just hanging out with your wife, walking, even nature as well, you can get that longer lasting. So serotonin can last hours and days, and oxytocin can, in some cases, last weeks and months. If you just have this glowing feeling. And just to kind of put that into context, I had a couple of years back, this is probably, I mean, in a way, it's a little bit sad that I'm admitting this, but it's just the truth. But one of the greatest days of my life was my mate's wedding, Fenna. And I was the master of ceremonies, and I was absolutely shitting myself. Like, I practiced it. I practiced my speeches, and I had introductions to everyone. And mate, the response I had was unreal. Like, people were coming up to me saying, "Are you a professional speaker?" And I was like, "Are you taking the piss?" And they were like, were you hired?" I was like, "No, I'm Fenna's mate. I went to school with him." And they're like, "You were unbelievable." It's like, you made the entire day. And people kept coming up to you, "Can I buy you a drink?" You were unbelievable. How did you get that much confidence? I was like, I was shitting myself the whole time. And like, you were brilliant. And this, mate, I can't, like, it lasted probably for about 6 or 8 weeks. I had a glowing, like, this love that I received from people. And I think from the challenge of going through it myself, I thought, I was just like on top of the world. I felt I was going to bed imagining me doing the speeches again. And I was like, oh, I could have said that. And I was like pretending how I could have done it better and reeling over this thought. But my ramblings being that when you connect to something like that and you have a feeling of connection, a real deep connection with other people and maybe achieving something, which for me was a blend of both, I had this glowing, like, you couldn't affect me in that space of time. It was just wonderful. So I know I'm rambling a little bit there, but my point is that story. Having kind of read into a little bit of this stuff, and I'm obviously far from an expert, but I kind of understand that there are things in life, and human connection, social connection is just so important to us. And that's where this gets a little convoluted, because social media can do that. Like when you send me a little clip or a little comment and I just like chuckle, like laugh, and it's like, you get, I suppose that is a dope, you get like a little hit and there's a little connection, and it is really warming, and like, oh, I've got to speak to that guy if you haven't spoken in a while. But the kind of that like and that underlying need for approval, and to get that hit of a dopamine spike that you get, it can be quite dangerous, and it is avoidable, and there are healthier, longer lasting alternatives.
So what you're saying is that, so when we look at that story, because I don't know that we disagree too much from what you're saying, when you look at that story, you're saying that that is a more positive, long lasting chemical reaction to social interaction, as opposed to a empty social media hit of dopamine.
Yeah. So it was just, that was the last time I felt this. It was like a glow. It was, and sadly that was now over 2 years ago, but it was so it was so warming. And then when people would talk about it, so I met with Fenner again, and we were talking about the spit, and they were like laughing and like recalling some of the things that I pulled them out on. And I was like, mate, I was so proud of myself that I was able to stand up and do it. And then for people to say how great it was, and it was like, you made my day. I was like, oh, that's like that. I can't tell you how much that means to me. And like, even weirdly now, Shawn, now I'm talking about it, I had this little glow there. Like it felt like I could reconnect to it. And obviously Facebook and, you know, or some of these likes and posts that you want for approval are slightly different. And if I were to flip that around a little bit, to use an example, I was reading through my my philosophy, and there was this just brilliant piece on when, and you may have seen, I don't know if you commented or saw it, but you may have seen it because I don't post hardly anything on Facebook. So if you do see something for me, it's a rarity. But I talked about, you know, as we're coming into this really difficult time, that we just need to refocus on our fundamentals. And, you know, just take a look at how you eat, sleep, breathe, move, and how grateful you are, how you focus on yourself, be present, all these type of things. And I just gave a couple of points to each one, just like eating. And I just put a couple of consider this, and sleeping, consider that. And I just thought, you know what, in my head, I know some people look at this, oh, what does he fucking know? Or, you know, does he think he's an? I was like, I don't care if this reaches to one person, and they can take 1 point, like it's been worth it. But I had some really lovely messages from it, and people liking it and love hearts and stuff. And I was addicted to that post. I was checking it like every few hours. And then if someone like looked, is there a comment? I'd be like, and I was looking at the likes at who liked it, and I was like, so and so hasn't liked it yet. And I was like, then starting to, what do you think, they haven't seen it, or do you think that just didn't connect with? And I started to go down that path. So this is someone that doesn't use it, but I caught myself, and I was wanting more. And then when it left a couple of days, and then someone brought a comment, I had this like, oh, a little like dopamine hit again. So I just wanted to share those couple of examples because I've had both, and I am still fallible for the dopamine hits, as every single other person is.
I find that those two examples, so the Facebook post and the and your experience being a public speaker, and you know, feeling good about that you know, at the wedding, feeling good about that experience and the feedback you had, and how that gave you this buzz. To me, that sounds the same in a way. It's just one's in a microcosm of social media, where if you were to take a look at that, so the way I view this is the way you see those, and I haven't read anything scientific about this. I did watch The Social Dilemma, by the way. But when we take a look at that situation where you gave that speech, all of those positive comments were no different than a Facebook comment to a certain degree. The only difference
I would disagree, but
the only difference being, with social media, you now have an avenue to get that fix again. Whereas I think what you had was, you had time to process that, you had time to walk away and look introspectively at it. Whereas on social media, you get that hit, people, you know, you put up a post that's really good, people say thank you, that's impacted my life, which to me is very parallel to you giving a really good speech, having, you know, people give you good feedback on that, the likes, the whatever, what have you. And the difference being, it's like, great, that felt good. Now, subconsciously, I'm going to try to get that hit again. And I think this is where young people fall into. It's like, how do I get more of those likes? They're not necessarily consciously thinking that, but I see definite parallels in what you're talking about at that wedding to social media.
For sure. So and yeah, I would say they are. I don't know that we're disagreeing, to be honest. I think that
I don't think we are. I think we disagree on
there are differences. There are key differences, and there are key differences between how you feel and how long you feel, and the addictive nature of it. But ultimately, there are lots of similarities too, which I would attest to. I think really to kind of dig down into the social media thing, because there's a distinct difference between there were multiple people that liked it or put a love heart for my Facebook comment that didn't leave a comment. So there was that like kind of addictive, surface level kind of approach. But I know what I've also done is look at someone that's made an effort on something, like they've talked about their job or something, and just as I've been flicking, I've been like, oh, love heart or like, and it's been like I'll just show my appreciation, boom. Like I can't be bothered to comment. It obviously doesn't mean that much to me, but I'm just gonna. So it's a very surface level kind of showy, I'm just trying to do my thing and just acknowledge you a little bit. And that's where I want to really class a distinction. It's like maybe the same as someone smiling, walk. No, it's not. It's not the same as that. But I'm trying to think of a different what the equal would be with someone like doing a speech and giving feedback. But when people leave comments, and I had, there were a couple of comments in particular that I had a warm-hearted glow from. And actually, when and
you're talking about
a few hours off the Facebook.
Talking about online or so
off
on
the
Facebook?
Facebook comment. Yeah, there were a couple of comments where I felt it was meaningful, and people had taken the time and been like, I needed this or whatever it was. Like, thank you so much for that, and you speak so much truth, or especially this point, or whatever it was. Those that actually made the time to do that, I was like, that felt. I was like, I kind of shared a gift with someone, and they've appreciated it and shared that back, and that was lovely. So I think there are differences in that.
It's the more you explain it, the more you're selling me on there's not that many differences. It's okay. I'm hearing something totally different than, not totally different. I think largely we agree on the general thesis here of what happens when you get positive comments and how it makes you feel.
So sorry to cut you off, because I want to try and I still feel I can do that. I think I can do a better job of explaining this. So
listen, mate, you're just wrong. I think just accept that I've made a great point and it's over. Yeah,
and you win.
Yeah, yeah. So what's going on next week? Go right ahead.
So with the wedding thing, when I walked away, I didn't need anything else. I was purely satisfied, and I walked away, and it was like, and that was with me, and I didn't need to speak to anyone. I didn't need to like, I'll text so and so to see how they feel. It's just like to hope that they mention how great. There was none of that. I didn't need it. I was just like really fulfilled for a long time, and it was weird how it sat with me. I remember having a conversation with my dad and with some other people. Oh, hey, Bean, what you been up to? I was like, do you know what? I'm glowing. And it's just, I started talking about it, and they didn't connect to it. They were like, they just couldn't understand. I was like, it's really hard. Like I am on a high at the moment, and it hasn't left me, and I feel fantastic because of this speech. I was like, oh, well done. I was like, no, you don't understand. It's like, I need to try and do more of this. Whilst with the Facebook thing, I needed more. There was a pull to it, and it took my attention away. And I was focused on checking it to see if people had. And I even did things like I replied to a comment, so it maybe there'd be more, and I liked it to try and get more people to see it. It's fucking how sad it is, but it's the truth. Like, I did that. Whilst I didn't have that need, my intention was totally different, and my reaction to it was very different. So I suppose maybe I haven't done a good job of explaining that, but I know how different it felt.
Yeah, I agree that. And I can't agree or disagree. It's going to have a different feeling. But so even then, the more you explain it, the more I think it's the same. So let me put it in a different context here, because you actually said the same thing there, the way I heard it. So you said, I didn't need that, I didn't need that immediate, gratification. So on Facebook, where you felt like you needed that other hit. But then you then said, I needed to do this again. I needed to do more of this, or I wanted to do more. And then you went to your father to speak to him. In a way, that's like, I'm going to put on it. So if we were to take that out of the social media realm, I find this is a more natural way to get those same hits. But the social media is like the fast food of that sort of approval, because I would expect, knowing you, and you and I are very similar, I would do the same thing. You would have been contemplating, is this something I can do more of? Is this something I can do more professionally? Is this something I can help people with? Because it made you feel good. But that has a slower burn, that process. It's a more healthy process. And I'm not saying what you're doing isn't normal, isn't healthy. I think that is the same process that happens in a very small microcosm on social media. And that's where I think you then have an unhealthy level of action reaction to get approval. You don't have to go through the work of, so what do I have to do to start speaking more publicly and to do X, Y, and Z on social media? It's like, how do I get those likes again? So you're finding a more quick burn, less efficacious way of getting progress to a specific goal. And I see that there's this is the whole thing that I think the algorithm plays off of. It's off of what will be a normal process of, I feel good, I'm going to talk to people about it. I need to find communities that I can talk to people about this. Oh, there's a, so if we look at your martial arts, there's a what do you do again? Is it a
I did. I don't do anything now, but I used to do
Cobra
submission
Kai.
grappling.
Submission grappling, yeah.
Cobra Kai, yeah.
What was your dojo? But you used to do submission grappling, and that was
yeah.
Okay. I can go there. There's a community that I can go, and I can physically learn to do something. Where on social media, you can become an armchair expert for likes, and you can put very shoddy content out there that needs very little qualification from experts to get that same hit. And I think when we look at social media, I think those two situations for me parallel very closely in some respects. It's just where they branch off is a healthy and an unhealthy direction. Where in your direction, in your direction,
it's the equivalent. Sorry, Shawn. Sorry, carry on.
Fucking hell! No, I'm kidding. So I'm rabbiting on. So in your direction, it's a healthy. I'm going to explore this in a very normal, and I'm going to take my time and I'm going to reflect on it, and I'm not going to be getting false feedback from people online that know little about me or my experience in public speaking saying great job, Huw. You're going to be going through a process of, okay, so this is what I need. Whereas on social media, you put on a post that makes people feel good. You don't need much information to probably get a false sense of where you're at in that endeavor. And I think that's where those differences are. I'll shut up now.
So apologies for cutting you off there, mate, because I've already cut you off earlier, so I don't like to do that.
I cut you off as well. I'm doing that right now.
That's fine. I see this argument as I think I'm looking at it more nuanced than yourself, and that it's like the equivalent of eating fast food and eating whole foods. They both fill you up, they both satisfy you, you can then go about your day, but the after effects are distinctly different. There's no there's no kind of gray area in that. There is a distinct difference of how you feel 3 hours on and straight after the meal, where like drowsy. Fast food is like drowsiness. You're then starving in 4 hours because you crave that stuff you just put in your body, whilst a healthy meal with good fats and proteins and carbs will kind of sustain you for longer. You won't have this like peaks and troughs, and without carbs, you won't feel kind of like that kind of sluggish feeling. That's the kind of metaphor I'm kind of using here. So I wasn't, when I just sat down and felt, I haven't felt this good in so long. Like, probably the last time I felt like this was when, like, at PGL doing something, like my last day there, and the love I received, I was glowing for ages, because again, I think it was just showered with love, and it was just, you couldn't knock me for that time. And I thought, like, I need to be doing more things where it's truly meaningful, and I'm like challenging myself, because I feel like, not like, oh, I need this. It wasn't like a burning desire, I've got to do something, look at it tomorrow. I just thought that this really does make life worth living when you feel this wonderful. And it's sadly, at my age, I haven't got enough of those, really, if I'm being honest. So the Facebook feel was very much the fast food. And let's be clear with this as well. Like, I don't use Facebook very often at all. You could put, on the two hands, you could have. I've not done many more posts than 10 in my entire life of being on it, and I've been on it for 10 plus years or something now. I don't know, a long time anyway. But the post that I did was probably not your standard Facebook post that most people will put on there. I wasn't like, oh, please look at me, tell me how great I am. It was kind of, it may have come across like that, but my pure intention was, I've just read something and I was like, I have to share that with people, because there might be someone that could really benefit from it. And that's how I try to live as a human being. So it was genuinely a gift to people. I was trying, like, and I was prepared for people. Some of my mates I know would have read that and taken the piss out of me. I know that. And I didn't care about that. I didn't care about being publicly kind of shamed or what the fuck you on about, Huw type of thing. I was prepared to put myself out there negatively to try and help a couple of people think about certain things, and maybe that would just take the edge off. So even though I did it in that way, it was coming from that, rather than, oh, check out my new beard, or look at my new car, or money. It wasn't like that and trying to get hits and likes. I was just trying to help people, and yet it still hooked me in. It still made me feel like I needed to respond and check, and I craved more attention to it. So I still funny enough, I smiled when you were talking, because I was like, no, when I'm hearing you talk, I just think I'm even more right by like, I could see the distinct differences. But
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to cover this through because, you know, please share your comments on this, that for those 11 of you that are watching, because it'd be really interesting to kind of see who's right. No, but like what you think of this, and whether or not you can purely see from Shaw's point of view how this all works together, or you see a more of a kind of a nuanced difference between them, and share your experiences from that. I'd be interested to know.
I think we agree that the building blocks are very similar. If we even look at the first, you know, when you compare those two situations, the foundation for those, or even in your example with fast food and regular food, the foundation for what gratifies you are there. It's just, you know, the follow through, I think, is where it's nuanced and evolved. Because if let's say you had made that same speech, let's say you did a YouTube video, let's say you did a live YouTube video, and I had experience for this when you were off for a few weeks, and I did some of those political videos that got some of our best traffic. I mean, I was getting 10, 12 viewers, which anybody watching this is like, what the fuck's that about? For me, that was like, wow, there's 10, 12 people listening to me. And some of that content I put out, there's 2 videos that I put out that I was actually quite proud of, which the political videos I find really difficult, because in my mind, I have these thoughts, and I know in my mind, the arguments I have, I need to start writing them down on paper and then sharing them are quite good. But the process, and I have a whole new respect for these political commentators, how they can articulate on the fly these thoughts to a high degree is next level. And that's training. I'm sure if I kept doing it, I would get better at it. For me, that was only an outlet. And in those examples, what you were describing on that speech that you gave at the wedding, I'm identifying with those feelings when I was giving that live video. And I found myself going a different direction with it as a flawed human being, saying, I need to do another live video tomorrow. And then I did another live video the next day, and it was shocking, and it scared me away from doing it ever again.
Oh, really?
Not really, but I was doing some videos. So I did that video. If you are watching this, it's one of my best ones, I think. It's the mail and vote one, the Dan Bongino review of that. And that one, I'd done a lot of reading on it. I was prepared for it, and I had already had debates with people. I wouldn't say debates, but it was conversations with people about that topic, and I was well researched on it, and I knew what to say. And I went on there, and I was just like, yes. And then I had another one it was a COVID one. It was just some ridiculous thing that they had paraded. It was another video that we have, I think, 70 views on now, where they were parading, the Trump administration paraded out all of these doctors, and I had quite a few views, and I had a lot of comments on it, and there was a lot of back and forth on it. And it was very gratifying. But at the same time, I felt like I was doing some level of good by showing a balanced view on these things without being hypercritical of, you know, even in those videos, I was saying, look, I'm not knocking people for thinking this, but here's why I question it. And a lot of what you were talking about in that public speaking thing came up into the social media realm, but I had an avenue to, instead of fostering that and seeing how can I become better at this, it's like, oh, I'm just going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to get the same gratification that I was subconsciously seeking. And it's when I watched the documentary, it really stands out, because I'm going to transition to another point, but that doesn't mean that we can't come back on this.
I think we should transition,
because that transitions onto the whole purpose. I think I started to get into the political speech. This is a fucking good segue, by the way. Is with social media, I always question how people have the views that they do, and because there was one comment in it where I forget who it was, but somebody was saying in the documentary, we wonder how people can believe the things they believe. But when you look at the way social media is set up, because it's an echo chamber, you only hear really one side of the story, given how the interface works, which isn't a positive or a negative in my view. It's just the way it works for things like porn and food. It does the same thing with political commentary. And there was that other storyline with the teenage boy, and it was very much a homage to the current political situation by creating this. It was actually that distracted me. In it, they called it the extreme middle. Was that it?
Yeah, it's like the central. Yeah,
extremes. I don't know. It just bothered me. It was just like I just had trouble buying into that whole extreme middle thing.
I thought it was quite clever, because it was, if they'd gone one way or the other, then it would have detracted from the whole thing. People would have been like, oh, well, you would had to have used the right as the negative, or vice versa. And they just went with something that was bang in the middle. Let's just make this a non-issue and create something we're not playing sides here. Just listen to the point that we're trying to make.
Yeah, for me, I looked at it and I thought extreme middle. Let's be honest, we know who they're referring to, and it was, to me, that was sort of, I thought they were, maybe this is actually a good case study on how my biases in my social media have made me think that is wow. Okay, so I'm just having a moment here because I watched that and I thought extreme middle is a stupid name for the right wingers. And actually there's plenty of left-wing protest groups there. And because I'm fairly left-wing and I see a lot of right-wing negativity, my brain automatically went there. That's really interesting.
Oh, yeah, really? Because again, I'd have to watch it again now, but it's interesting you said that, because the way I viewed it was, aren't these just protesters, like left-wing protesters? That's the way but they made it central. So that's the way I was kind of looking at it. These are people kind of fighting back.
But this is me being a bit, not vulnerable, it's not the right word, but me just sort of being open to how much of a dickhead I am. But I'm just like every other dickhead on the internet, and I consume so much stuff inadvertently that's to my sensibilities that
we all do.
I see more protests and negativity towards right-wing stuff because I tend to gravitate in the last 4 years, really specifically, because I'm very anti what's going on in the States right now with the right wing, with Donald Trump. My social media feed would have been filled with examples of protests or people recently who have been, and right away I connected that to right wing, and it's not attributable to left or right. And that would be an interesting case study in itself of how these things work in just a very small bubble.
It's proof. It's kind of proving its point in many ways, isn't it?
And when I look at the people that I debate with, and when we look at those examples, I am an example in itself, as much as the people that, let's say, are anti-masks. And I question how people that are intelligent, and this is the one thing I've said on this show before I watched this, how do people seemingly intelligent have a viewpoint that is so against science and fact? And I have to be careful because I'm skirting what are my biases and my viewpoints. But there are opinions, and I think it is a valid point. I do have some opinions that are based in science and fact that are not based in my biases, that people, in my view, I don't understand how they can ignore. We look at climate change, we look at, vaccines, we look at mask wearing.
Yeah.
So those are things that we have medical consensus on, and people will say, no, it's bogus. Or even recently in the election, there's no evidence to prove in the U.S. that there was problems in the election, but the president of the United States is trying to foster a sense of impropriety in the process. And there's people that are just jumping in with both feet without researching it. However, if all of their media is people what seem to be in good conscience saying, yep, the Democrats are trying to steal this election. There's court cases out right now. There's affidavits proving this, that, and the other. You're not necessarily hearing the other side of the story, which the courts are saying, yeah, there was no impropriety. We have this and this evidence, so we're just going to throw this out and it's a joke. But they're not seeing both sides of the coin. And I'm probably not seeing the other side of the coin, which is maybe there's some legitimate concerns because that's not in my feed.
Charlie Munger said something in his book, and it just really struck a chord with me. It was, and I will not do it justice, but it's along the lines of that. In an ideal world, no man will put forward any argument without having a stronger counter argument. It was something to that effect that you basically should not have an opinion on something unless you have a stronger understanding of the opposing view of that. And I just thought, what a wonderful world we would live in if everyone kind of took that on board. But of course we won't, because why would you? It goes against human nature because we want the path of least resistance. So once we understand something and like something and attach ourselves to it and identify with it, why would we waste our seeing time to prove how wrong we are against something that we dislike and want to be as distant from as possible? And in reality, that is a way to a healthier world that we try and understand. And there's that other saying that I absolutely love this saying. It's not said enough, but again, I'm going to butcher it, but you'll know what I'm talking about. But don't, you can't judge a man until you walk a mile in his shoes, or something to that effect. And there are so many of us that kind of sit there and cast judgment over something we have no fucking idea how to do. And actually, presidency is one where, we could talk about someone's character, but whether or not someone is a good or bad president, I don't think any of us can really sit there and judge until we've been in the shoes of the presidency and we know what type of task that is. Like we can cast judgment and give our opinion on maybe a speech on that someone gives and their opinion on something and how we disagree because of X, Y, and Z. But to sit there and say how well or badly someone's done, let's go in their shoes before we cast that judgment. And so those are a couple of points I just want to throw out there because I'm saying this to you as someone that knows that. And I'm lying if I sit here and say that I do that. I don't. I will follow the path of least resistance, and I do try to take an interest in looking at the other side, and especially when it comes to debate, I think it's really important to sit and listen and try and understand that other point of view. I'm probably much better at that, but really, when it comes to feeding my opinion on something, I'll just stick to what I know and what makes sense to me.
Yeah, and it comes down to when you listen to the other side too, the other side of the opinion, it's finding a good source for that other side of the opinion as well. Because you don't want to be stuck in a trap where you're listening to the same claptrap you're hearing on your side. Well, to a degree, it does help to hear another point of view and another argument. But when you go too far to the other side of the coin, you spend more time trying to debunk it than you do trying to understand it because it is so extreme. And this kind of doubles into that conversation we had about media and media's responsibility.
Yeah. Go on. It's really fascinating.
I'm more of the belief, even with all of this, that media needs free reign to do whatever they want, because at the end of the day, they're a consumption service and it's going to be based on demand. The change has to happen with how we educate people on how to consume media. So just like how we've had to educate people on how to consume food or how to not smoke or how to drive safely, or I'm just making these up off the top of my head. Some of these metaphors may be absolutely shit and I can edit those out later. However, when we take a look at those relationships, let's say we have somebody that's too far left or too far right. Those media companies that are down the middle that are going to be very like Associated Press type things, they're going to have more value because people are going to at some point want to know what the real news is. However, there's going to have to be some way to really expose biases on both sides, because media needs to challenge, in my view, and this is what democracy has been built on. Free media to have the ability to challenge and to question that of the people that are in power. That's what one of the beautiful things about media in the societies we live in. They have total freedom to ask whatever question they want, and as a representative, a soundboard of us to a certain degree, we should expect our politicians to not be afraid of the questions and to answer those questions.
I agree.
Now the media has the freedom to go on and to put whatever narrative they want out there to a certain degree. There's laws against libel.
Yeah,
there are laws to protect people, but there's no education as to how these. And I think the social dilemma that some of the people I've seen that are turning off their social media, what it's done is it's done a tremendous job for both sides of saying, look, you do get stuck in these echo chambers, and you do get taken down this garden path. If we educate people, on what they should be looking for, what they can get stuck in, I think that's more the way forward. It's giving people an understanding of how these tools work.
I think I agree with pretty much everything you've said there, mate. The media needs to have free reign to challenging is really important. Like it's just the same as any relationship. It's not healthy to be in a relationship where I can't say things where I'm worried about treading on eggshells with you and offending you. You need to have a certain amount of resilience and strength of character that you can take criticism, at least I'm not saying enjoy it. I don't think there's really anyone that enjoys it, but you should be able to accept it and consider it. And you may or may not choose to do anything about that. That's, but you need to be able to receive it. And I think with things, when you've got something like government where they have a huge amount of power and influence, they need to be able to be challenged left, right, and center. And again, how they deal with that is something else, but you shouldn't be shutting people down. I just want to make a couple of points. I'm going to scoot back to this, but I want to briefly talk about when Donald Trump was giving a speech, I think post-election, and then the news anchor came and cut him off. Okay, so I want to come about that because I think there's what we're talking about is very relevant to that. But I want to come back to the original point, which is saying what we spoke about a few weeks ago about media. I think they have a responsibility they can challenge and broadcast maybe how they wish, whether that's, as long as it's within the kind of rules and they're not liable and outright lying, having their stance on it and their lean on it, I think is totally acceptable. And we maybe encourage that. But where I'm disappointed is in things like the BBC, who try and, will claim to be as impartial as anyone. Like, I think they're a good example for someone that tries to come from, look, we don't have sides. This is just the news. And where I'm really disappointed in them is I think they are leaning. They're leaning towards clickbaity kind of, not less clickbaity, but it's that they're touching the side of it with trying to invoke a reaction. And that's what pisses me off. Is like you are saying you're impartial and you're trying to come across as that. And from a political standpoint, I think you do a very good job of trying to navigate that murky water. But what pisses me off about it is that you just put the news on anytime you talk about COVID. It's all the negativity around that. They're so heavily skewed to the negativity side of it because that's what we connect to, and that's what's invoking this reaction in me now, this passion and this anger and frustration. Where is the balance on that? Where all the positive comes from, that we're going to be fucking okay, guys. That we will, the vast majority of us will get through this. We are going to be good. Let's look at some of the positive sides of this and really report that. So again, guys, don't go out there and be shitting yourselves about going to bed tonight. There are some things to be concerned about. Here's what we can do about it. But let me talk about some of the positivity too. And therefore, you have a balanced approach. So that's what gets my goat up a little bit about media, because I think it's all fucking leaning to that one side. And that's why I have to it loses me altogether. Like, yes, give the balanced political approach, but also give a balanced approach from the kind of the good and the bad of that and the good and the bad of the opposite. I don't think it's enough in itself just to be neutral from a political standpoint. So I don't know if you want to comment on that first, mate, because I do want to go back and talk about the Donald Trump thing.
Well, I think that segues nicely into that. I agree the BBC does well on balance if you compare them to the media organizations.
Definitely.
And what I don't have experience of, because I've only really paid attention to politics specifically in the last 5 to 6 years, especially here, is whether when there was, I seem to think when Labor was in power, they were highly critical of Labor, but I don't know if it was to the same degree. Where I get annoyed is,
by the way, in the UK, every prime minister is rinsed now. It's a joke over here. So it doesn't matter what side you're on. We're going to make the prime minister is a source of ridicule. So it's not. It's got nothing to do with sides.
What I get annoyed at is I don't get annoyed at. So there's certain people on the BBC that I really like when they're interviewing, and there's certain people that I find insufferable at times. Okay. So a good example of what I think is a really good interviewer is Naga Munchetty in The Morning.
Okay. Yeah.
She's tough. She's strong. She's not overly emotive. She asks tough questions. She doesn't turn it into a ridicule session when somebody struggles to get an answer. And sometimes I think these politicians, the thing I like about the BBC is they will hold the politicians, feet to the fire and ask them really tough questions. And what annoys even my wife about it is sometimes they're, really asking these stupid questions. And my view is they have to, because they're representing people that have stupid questions, and they're giving the politicians a platform to knock that out of the park. Here's a stupid question. Let's nail it. And politicians don't. In this country, for some reason, in the last 6 years, politicians have been the worst representative for their message anywhere that I've seen. There's someone in my head and even in your head, you see how they answer the question, the answer to the question they're going to be answering, and they do a terrible job of delivering that answer. And then whomever is, on that interview is just hammering that point over and over and over. And we all know that it gets annoying. So that there is a piece where I think they go a bit too far when it comes to, and this is where it's down to getting headlines. They're probing for that soundbite, and in
gotcha.
But in a sort of a
Efficient.
free market society, it's a survival tactic because yes, they're government funded, but they also are competing in a marketplace where people don't have the same, restrictions they do. So, to a certain degree, I think this is where we have to, as consumers, consume what we like, and the BBC then has to make changes based on what we like. And it's not an easy field to navigate. There's no right or wrong way to do it. The only thing we can actually do is make sure that we understand how to consume media, and we have resources that we know are unbiased facts. And that's a hard thing to know right now. These people claim to be unbiased and they're not. CNN, I actually don't mind CNN. I don't think CNN are great, but I also think they do a good job of presenting facts at times. But I wouldn't necessarily call them a place that I would go if I want to know what my viewpoint is, essentially.
Yeah, I can't comment too much on the news side of things because I no longer watch it. It's just that I think when you were saying it, there's no right and wrong with it. Well, the counter to that would be if someone is claiming to be impartial, like the BBC. And yeah. I think they do navigate that very well overall. I would say of something that is very difficult. I think is worth pointing out as well. I just think from the negativity standpoint and what you just mentioned, some of the interviewers going for the gotchas. I really struggle with that stuff. It's like looking for the soundbite, and I understand that. It's a very competitive marketplace and everyone is vying for attention, which the social dilemma kind of alludes to. I just think there is a better way of doing more balance when it comes to kind of positive, like the news. Let me just summarize this. I'm going to really oversimplify this, but the news is about inspiring negative emotions. And that's what disappoints me. Is that it leans to whatever side you're looking at now, and whichever country you're in, you'll see that, especially in the Western world, from what I've seen, which let's be honest, it's really US and UK, it just leans towards trying to instigate fear, anxiety, frustration, anger, and I just feel really disappointed by that, and that there is a very big space for the complete opposite of that: warmth, comfort, and encouragement. And like I do see you for my little that I've watched the news, they do have those stories which are heartwarming and lovely. But what if I were to suggest that? What is the total airtime of that? What is prioritized? And is there an equal amount of showing of that? Again, I don't have any stats to back this up, so I'm open to be pushed back on this, but I don't think there is that open time. Like all of the top stories, all of the main attention, the main time and energy and focus is on that negative side, and that's just what disappoints me, because I think that is wrong. I don't think that is the right way to do things. If you're claiming to be impartial, if you just want clicks and money, you crack on, you do what you want. But I don't think they're doing a great job of being a like world-class broadcaster unless you're doing something on a neutral basis, showing both sides.
I'm going to agree, but not agree at the same time. I agree with the sentiment. I don't agree with the statement, and that's going to sound like a bunch of bullshit. But it's a free market society, and in that free market, if we look at, so I saw a post from somebody that I follow, and they make videos on YouTube, and it was this person did which came up in my algorithm, something about beards. And this person did 2 different videos, one of which was about the 10 things not to do to your beard, and also what are the best beard things you can do, or something along those lines.
Okay, like a positive and negative frame.
And he said the bad beard video outperformed substantially the good beard video, and the content was essentially the same. And I don't think there's times where when we look at what the media is doing, is they're doing exactly what we need them to do, which is get our eyes on the TV. That's their job. They need to get eyes on, and they need to be accurate. And it's not their job to necessarily say, we're going to go against the trend of what gets us views and be positive, because that's counterintuitive for how they're set up as a business. Now that opens up the door for other broadcasters to deliver that content you want. So clearly there's a space in commercially for somebody who's a bit more down the middle to be that centrist view, who's going to be negative and positive about things. But even right there, that whole effort of I'm going to make sure that I'm being more positive, that is still not a decision that's driven by fact necessarily. That's driven by opinion and perception. And that is going to bring in its biases in itself. I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And it's difficult for we're trying to discuss an issue that is not black and white. It's not an issue that we can, we can come to, and we what the social dilemma has done for me is it's really raised awareness that we need to raise awareness. We need to be aware of what we're consuming. We need to know where we can fact check things, and we need to be more educated consumers. And the marketplace will then read and react, or at least that's how it's supposed to. If BBC stops getting viewers because everybody is saying it's negative and they're doing the market research, and market research says it's negative, then they're going to have to change their content to meet the needs of the changing public. But we're not educated consumers right now. We're living in a world where every restaurant is fast food and we're having diarrhea every day, and we think diarrhea is the normal way to live. Until somebody says, I had a solid shit. It's like, you had a what?
It's like, what? Why are they?
I didn't know that existed. But when we look at the other side of the coin, going into the Trump thing, I've actually got a video I found, Trump cut off by networks. This is a strange one from the perspective of the U.S. So from the outside, if we take a look at what's happened, just to sort of summarize what I understand, I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds with the election. Donald Trump has lost the election for all intents and purposes. He hasn't declared that he's lost. He's actually said, if you were to listen to nothing but Donald Trump, you'd think there's actually some impropriety. It's been confirmed, and there's legal battles right now, and Donald Trump may be president. The reality of the situation is every court case he's put forward has pretty much been thrown out. They haven't really provided any evidence that I can stand behind and say, yes, this is something to be concerned about. Even Fox News is starting to say, yeah, we really need to think about moving this thing on because what you're doing is a bit weird now. But some of the language and some of the actions he's taking, to some, I'm not giving my opinion, but to some look like a bit of a government coup. Now, that's a dramatic point of view, and that's how some people are going to be looking at it on the left. But when you then start looking at society, if, let's say, the president was actually, just as an argument, let's say the president was making moves to stay in power by skewing the message, by changing the narrative that the election was fraudulent, and trying to win over, let's say, right now he's installed loyalists in the military in the U.S. For somebody who is confirmed not going to be the president in January, he's putting new hires in the it's not Ministry of Defense, that's what it's called here, in the Pentagon. So he's putting people in the Pentagon that are loyal to his needs. And usually in the U.S., the military and politics is separate. The White House does not have a controlling interest in how the military works. That's very purposeful.
Okay.
And Donald Trump, somebody who is leaving a job in 2 months, is firing people and hiring new people into positions who are loyal to him. So a lot of those things sound very strange. He's trying to sell a narrative that is not backed in any way by fact. And some of these news agencies, in this example that I'll show you, like you were saying, were cutting off the president in fear that they were advertising false information. So there's a balance here where we want news agencies to be accurate, but where do they cut that line?
Yeah.
I'm going to play.
I was going to say, do you want to play it?
Yeah, let's see what we got here.
Are again in the unusual position of not only interrupting the president of the United States, but correcting the president of the United States. And
we're interrupting this because what the president
That's Fox News, by the way,
in large part is absolutely untrue.
He is talking about something, making an allegation with absolutely no evidence whatsoever.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. We won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech.
Much of that statement was not factual.
So just so you know, this is somebody who is a staunch Trump supporter. I actually found him difficult to listen to as somebody who doesn't like Trump, because he was somebody who I would say he is just being paid to
Just
whatever
ridiculously.
Trump says to back it up.
Yeah,
So
no
that
matter
just
what.
want to put that into context.
And was at times incendiary and not something that President of the United States should say or any elected officials.
So I want to, I feel like I'm a bit all over the shop here, but I want to tie all of this together. And where I struggle with the media not getting involved, I struggle with this because there's the people that follow Trump, the people that are going to be going to Washington, or the people that are going to be going to the Supreme Court or going to all these voting institutions where they were counting votes. They are people that tend to be the right wing, the militias that are armed with high capacity weapons. This isn't me being biased. This is the reality. You generally see these are the guys that walk around with the ARs on their shoulders, these supporters for Trump. And you start to wonder if you're a media agency, and let's say for argument's sake that Trump had enough support. Let's say he had enough support of people that are blindly following this narrative that he's pitching. Where does media then take responsibility? How do they go about doing that? Do they jump in after the fact and then say, here's what we know is fact? Do they interrupt him because he is trying to overthrow the government? Not that he is. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I felt quite strongly about this, that they just let him speak. He's the president of the United States. Let him air what he wants to say, and then ridicule him as much as you want after, and prove that he has nothing on it and he's a joke. To actually cut him off and censor him, I thought was an outrage. And this is someone that I can't understand how he was president. I have no leniency either, and I don't follow US politics. So I don't really know or care from that end of it. So I'm not saying it from someone leaning either way. It's just that you should be given the opportunity to or not. And if it's like, well, what he said could be damaging, well, what all of them say could be damaging. So now it's on you. You're now, someone has made the call to be interrupting. Do you now interrupt any other people? And that you should be staying well away from that. Your job is to report on what you do. You can then give your statements after it. But this is where it gets in this kind of, it kind of on a deeper level. This is a much deeper conversation in general, Shawn. But this censorship thing really bothers me, and the whole Twitter thing. And when people getting cancelled being from a certain side, there are more right wingers that are cancelled than left, and that left can seemingly say ridiculous, outrageous things on Twitter, but people on the extreme right can't say certain things. And I think that it's very dangerous territory, and that if you're going to go down that cancelling route, which I don't think you should, but just stay away from it. Let them say what they need to say, ridicule them afterwards with fact and backed up points, rather than trying to interrupt someone. I think it's a really slippery slope when you're going down that thing, and that's what I don't like about the whole lockdown side of things, is that this kind of what you can and can't do, I think, is really dangerous when the government asserts power, because where does it stop, Shawn? Like, we talk about masks, and I know it's something that you feel very strongly about. And as a fellow human, I support that. But I also support the right for humans to, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Because at the same time, I'm not going to stand outside the fast food joint. You're not coming in. You're over 20, so you're not allowed in this place. Well, what the fuck are you? Who am I to say what you should and shouldn't do? Oh, no, you got to turn the TV off or electric off now. You need to go into bed because you're not sleeping enough, and you're more likely to get cancer, and you're not looking after. It's a real. I don't like it when people. There's someone out there's making opinions of when they should start to cross the line on what should and shouldn't be done. And I think I fully back a point that you made earlier about media. You should be let them say what needs to be said, and let them dig their own grave in that side. You don't have to agree with it. Come with the points later on. And I think people should be standing up for having the opportunity to have that freedom of speech. So yeah, I really that kind of worried me actually seeing that. I don't like that at all. Don't support any of that.
I'm 80% with you on that, and there's 20% of me that has some doubt, because the platform, when we look at what does it take to overthrow a current democratic structure, it's getting your message out there. And if, let's say, I'm going to be charitable with what Donald Trump was saying there. If, let's say, there was some truth in what he was saying. Let's say 20% of what he said is accurate. 80% of what he's saying is dangerous to democracy because he's telling outright falsehoods. So I want to be very clear. What he said, as far as I understand, wasn't even close to the truth. It was gaslighting, and it was a narrative that to me looked like he's trying to influence negatively the process and influence democracy negatively. And the only thing that I question in that is an office where we should expect legally they have to be honest. And there's no real control over that. And I can see these media organizations saying, we are being tasked to report on facts. And we are now reporting on falsehoods from somebody that's supposed to be a reputable source. I can understand them jumping in. And Fox News was one of the people. Fox News, the Donald Trump sound machine, were one of the people that jumped in and actually cut off the president. And I would say when we look at everyday people, we look at even just Congress people, or where there's more checks and balance. I agree. I don't know where I sit when it comes to situations like that are unprecedented in history, where the person that is elected to represent the nation is telling, falsehoods or preaching falsehoods. They go checked, but if you let him say what he says, and then you go on to deliver your content, you're not necessarily hitting that moment saying, look, we're broadcasting things that are false right now. What he's saying is patently false.
I just, so again, I don't follow all this. And if you were to ask me what my gut feel is that it's probably all lies, but I have nothing to substantiate that either. And what if on the, on our opinion only basis is that like we're wrong, and that there is actually some underhand shit going on here? Because let's be honest, there is quite a lot of evidence. There's a lot of underhand stuff going on both sides of the party. There's no clean party when it comes to this. Politics is dirty as it gets. So if there were something going on behind the scenes, surely what we should do, or what the media should do, is report upon that and have give the person their side of the story. And like I said, if it comes out that it is false, then he needs to go to jail. He needs to get fines. He needs to, whatever the punishment you feel is, there should be some banning, whatever the appropriate action after that. But give him the platform, and he should have the opportunity to do that. I just don't think anyone should be doing, unless he's got a gun at the team, like kill people, and there's some horrendous thing that he's actually doing. Like, I'm trying to think of what circumstance might it be warranted. But if someone's saying there's an underlying problem with the system, it's corrupt, and let's just hear what he says. Let's hear this. Okay, and then act on it. Well, this is complete garbage. You must pay a fine. You have to pay a penalty for that. You're supposed to be, you're the most influential person, maybe even in the world. And if that's come from nothing, there should be repercussions to that, and let that play out in the appropriate means in court and what needs to be done. But let him have his airing space, because no one should be shut down from, if you're allowed to shut people down, then what happens if someone does want to speak? And then that media outlet comes on and cuts it off. So if there's someone
does he not have Twitter?
Let's say that you want to expose the left side for something, which I think this is what was happening, and then the left news comes on and cuts them out. Oh, this can't be done. Then the people watching that news have kind of got a falsehood of, they haven't been given that the other side of the story. And I feel that like it should be aired. You can have your opinion on it afterwards and ramifications, but he should be given a platform to do that.
I think I lean that way. The only thing I question is it's not as if he doesn't have a platform with millions of people that can view him unabashedly. He has a platform of millions of followers on Twitter.
I think that's irrelevant. I think it's, as a news outlet, you need to be neutral and give someone the space. I think, it's not like, I don't think that came in. So my point is, I don't think that came into their mind, Shawn. I don't think it said, well, let's stop him. If he wants to say what he needs to, he'll say it on Twitter. No, I think it was just, they were censoring something they should not have been censoring, in my opinion.
And I think that's where there's a point that I'm not necessarily sold on that, because if the president has gone on and the content he's delivering is just simply fabrication that has not even a relationship with the truth, they're also responsible for that content. Because if let's say they were interviewing somebody who is slandering, let's say a woman said she was raped, and you're interviewing somebody who is slandering that person just based on hearsay, they would get shit for airing that.
Right.
And
so my point would be that there'd be basically no politicians on TV almost ever, because almost all of them are full of shit at some time. Almost every one of them has lied at some point. So do we then cut off? Who is to say at which they do or don't? They need to be recorded. And I think where the problem lies,
yeah,
with
I agree with
the
that.
ramifications and the follow-up and the fact-checking is the issue. That's the issue here. Not that he's got a platform to speak on. Give him the platform, make him look a fucking idiot. But where's the follow-up question and the verification? I don't know if you saw this with Rogan when he was talking about it, but and for those viewers that are watching this, Joe Rogan invited both of them on, and President Trump kind of jumped to it. I think probably knowing that Joe Biden wouldn't and wanted to look more of like the stronger man, and he's more gung ho, so perhaps he would be up for that. I don't know how that would have went for him or Biden, but how fascinating that would have been, because Joe actually said that these ridiculous debates that they have on TV, where it's an hour and a half, and you've got to talk about climate change in 2 minutes. Like, come on, like you could. 2 days of climate change isn't enough to really go into the detail of it. They need to have free reign to really go back and forth and have their arguments and counter arguments and get to the bottom of it. And 2 minutes isn't enough. And he said that what we would do at the same time is Jamie would be fact checking everything that they're saying and say, hang on a minute, sir, like you just said this or what you stood for, but 3 years ago you were saying exactly the opposite. Why have you done that? Like that wasn't the stance that you had. You've just stated you've always stand. And you can really pull them apart. There's no pulling apart. And I think at the moment that's happening, and that is something that we need to be focusing on. Like, how do we do a better job at that? Like, personally, again, it's a longer issue. The whole political system is damaged. It will never happen, but it needs to be totally eradicated. And you have people representing. There's no teams. There's just, these are my policies. These are my policies, and you vote for the right people. Not two. You have multiple, and that it should be more of a coercion that. Then we work together collaboratively across both aisles, or there's no two aisles, there's multiple aisles, and we're trying to get something that's, more central and, collaborative on both sides of the argument, rather than it's just all one way or all the other. Like, think what you want now, but there's still almost, I don't know what the exact numbers were, Shawn, but almost 50% of the population in the US, which are very unhappy with the result. And they now have to be led by someone that opposes largely, like the gap has got further and further, right? Someone that's opposing almost everything of what they disbelieve in. And it's just, it's not healthy. So I know I've rambled a little bit there, but
it's difficult because I think the institution of media does keep politics in check to a certain degree. Media in a Western society prevents politicians from, if we let's say remove this issue of whether Trump's his words were aired, no matter what, no matter who cut him off, everybody knows what he said from beginning to end.
Well, that's fair. We did get it in the end, didn't we?
Yeah. So every news agency broke apart everything he said, and then they just didn't air it in real time. Now, I think there's a very good argument to make that it should have been aired, and how to. Joe Rogan, to a certain degree, is saying that these people should be kept in check when they say stupid shit. And in a way, that's supporting the fact that they didn't have the opportunity to keep the president in check with the stupid shit he was saying. But media, in some respects, whether you like media or not, it's irrelevant. In Western society, is that freedom of speech, that freedom to report what you want and how you want it, is what's preventing a government overthrow in many cases. Part of what keeps people in check in North Korea and China is their influence over the media. And that influence cannot even, they should have the freedom to cut off when they see something that's not factual. And for me, I think in some respects, the reason I question it is it's worked to a certain degree, because even the right-wing agencies have cut off, what he was saying mid-sentence, because it was so fabricated and false. And it's difficult to say that every media organization is working for an Illuminati or something like that. There is a trend that we can pick up on both sides of the aisle, that I'm getting the right information, that what he's saying is full of shit. Now, if it turns out that what he's saying was 100% accurate, and he goes to the court systems, and the court systems, grant him the presidency, then yeah, maybe I need to rethink that. But I'm not 100% sold on what they did was necessarily wrong.
That's the issue though, because they've now broken that bond. They've now allowed it. They've now deemed it acceptable to do that. And who's to say in future that that they do that and they're wrong? That's where the damage is. My point is not that Trump is talking shit. It's irrelevant what I think on that. As a matter of fact, he should just be, as the president, the most powerful man in the world, be given the opportunity to have that platform, because in future circumstances, now that they've allowed that and it's acceptable, they may do that, and there may be someone that actually warrants it, and there may be some real issues that people are bringing to the table. And you just only have to hear, you hear some of the people that come onto Rogan's podcast and talking about they've actually looked into running the presidency and what's been involved with that. And they've been contacted by people and been scared off it and told you need to pay these people money to be part of the. And you're like, oh my god, it's so dirty. And the whole program House of Cards with Kevin Spacey, and you're like, God, I wonder how much of that is actually true. And again, it just makes you think, doesn't it, that actually it's really important, because it sounds, what I'm hearing, and I have no evidence whatsoever, but what you hear is that it's very corrupt and dirty, and that you need to be given that platform. And I just think people are overlooking the danger when you allow it, and now it's acceptable to cut off people when we think it's factually incorrect. Well, what if you get that wrong? And this might have been right, but you've just made a rod for your back that it's now acceptable. And I think that's very dangerous.
But is that the only? So I would agree with you if every media organization across the board did that. CNN aired the whole thing. I listened to the whole thing on CNN. Interestingly, I had to go to CNN to listen to the president. So it's not as if there's only one media source that I have to digest. It's a free market society. And I think we can take get a scale of what did the president say? Can I find out what he said? 100% yes. Are there places I can go to listen to everything he said? Yes. He has his own media sources. So it's not as if there's one media agency that's controlling the message. There's different businesses at play here that are making independent decisions on their business and on their values. And I think it's uncomfortable at times, but I think that thin thread keeps everything in balance. And in this case, many of these organizations said what he's saying is so full of shit that we're now advertising lies. And there's other organizations that said we think these lies should be advertised. That's great. That to me is media working to a certain degree. It's just down to the consumers. Again, it goes back to the same piece, to be more educated and to create a marketplace where, okay, if I know this news organization is going to be airing everything unsolicited, that's who I'm going to go to, and they're going to get more viewers and more ad revenue. Everything, it's not easy. It's uncomfortable. But the more I think about this and the more I talk about it, the more I'm not that bothered about it.
I think people overlook. It's like the Jordan Peterson thing, where he was sacked from his job as a professor in Canada because he refused to be told that he had to refer to people in their pronouns. And he was like, no, you're not going to tell me what to say. And like, well, no, just say it. Well, have you got a problem with calling people Caesar or whatever it was? He's like, no, it's the point that you're making me say something by law. He's like, that's a impeachment of my freedom of speech. And that's you cannot do that. I have to be able to air whatever I feel that I want to air, right or wrong. And he's like, it's irrelevant what my thoughts are of that person and using their pronouns. Is you cannot tell me what to say by law. It's like that's where we go down to dictatorship. And that's my point here, is that we're sliding down the path of something very dangerous when you can choose what to air and not, because you feel it's false, because you could go through with a fine-tooth comb and eradicate most of media because of the bullshit that's on there. So that's what I'm saying. It's a dangerous slope to be on, and I think it's irrelevant what people think. I feel very strongly about that, and I don't think I'll kind of change my opinion on it. And my concern is that I think people overlook that. It's like, maybe put this as another analogy, Shawn. It's like someone that doesn't drink just having a drink. It's like, well, it's only one. It's like, no, that's a slippery. You don't understand how slippery that is. It isn't one drink. You're opening up the potential chasm of falling into a full-on addiction and being that. Now, okay, is that going to happen? No, but that's irrelevant. It's like you're opening up that opportunity. It's that kind of Pandora's box thing. And I think you've got to be really careful. I think that's what concerns me, is the fact that, like, even you as someone that's very educated and knowledgeable and very fair-minded, open-minded, is someone that's kind of is prepared to see, is overlooking it's not that big a deal. And I think as an overarching action, it's actually huge, and people are overlooking that.
Where I'm disagreeing is this isn't something that, so one, yes, the law can very much, and it should do some level of censorship, or else you could just have people getting murdered on TV. You know, you could show executions on TV and that would be okay. And that infringes on people's freedom and how they want to raise their kids, because to a certain degree you can say, well, I can't control where kids have access to media. You know, there are certain controls legally. And I think the metaphor with Jordan Peterson, the analogy with Jordan Peterson, his freedom to say what he wants is 100% there. But the agencies that are advertising or broadcasting that have freedom to make editorial decisions on what they can or cannot broadcast, same as any business can. So that same freedom that we want to ascribe to speech, we also have to ascribe to how people run their businesses. And I think for me, the solution is having people have that editorial freedom to do what they want. Now, this does fall down that rabbit hole that the social dilemma is kind of going down, because now you're creating avenues with biases, you know, people who are making those editorial choices. But in a way, the more choice you have, you know, the more avenues people have to consume information. And no matter what, there's always going to be there's going to be facts, there's going to be black and white, but there's going to be editorial opinion, and we can't get away from that. And Donald Trump's statements in this instance were not censored across the board. I had access to him very easily. I very easily knew what he said, every sentence of what he said, even though when I watched it on Fox News, it was cut off. I went to CNN to then watch it. Or if I got cut off, I would then go and read those comments. So I'm not disagreeing with you in the sense that I don't think people should be censored as far as what they say. It's just, where are they saying it and who has control over that? Does NBC have control over the whole media spectrum? No. Does CNN? No. Does Fox? No. So I don't, in that regard, I think this is where media is kind of doing, it's an uncomfortable natural progression of things where they've made a decision, most of those agencies across the board, to say this is full of shit, we can't air this, and there's others who said they can. And that to me is a really interesting way to take a step back and to get a full picture of everything. I now have information, people giving me different views that I can now chime in on, but that's because I'm becoming a more educated consumer. He still has the presidency. He can create a US president's media channel, and I can decide to go to the president and watch it. He can put it free to air TV, like North Korea. He can have a state-run TV. BBC do that, and BBC would probably not cut off the prime minister if he did that. I know I can go there. And that's why I think there has to be some, it sounds rather polar opposite to what you're saying, but I think it very much mirrors some of the views you have. I think media needs to have some freedom.
I think we do agree on more than what maybe we're making out. Because to go back to your point on, you know, airing murders and stuff like that. No, of course, I'm not suggesting we air absolutely.
That was an extreme, by the way. Yeah,
but it's a worthwhile point for a distinction, because I do agree with you, and there are certain cases where actually the full truth maybe isn't healthy for us in our best interests in some cases, which is then when you get down to that. Well, this is the censorship point, and it's difficult of what you air and what not to. But when it comes down to just a speech from the president, I don't think that should be. You know, I think that is a great example of someone that should be given their full, you know, he's a professional speaker and has been leading a country for 4 years. He should be given you're not going to go over insane overnight, I'd imagine. That he should be given the time to at least speak, whether or not, you know, you agree with him. So I still kind of stand by my point, but your point is spot on, that, you know, the ramifications of that action in this case, it really not that big a deal, because there are platforms that were able to air him. You can look at it, you can see through it. It wasn't kind of held down. I just the whole point on trying to close people down and censor it at that level of speech. You know, it's not like you've got Joe from the street and Joe's an absolute nutcase schizophrenic and he's scaring everyone and swearing and, you know, cut that guy off. When we're talking about the president and he's got a closing speech, I think that is the platform where you do let someone air right or wrong. And you know, I'd like to see more consistency with, if you are now cutting people off for fact checking, then I would like to see a hell of a lot more people being cut off for what they're saying. And I don't think that will happen. So that's why I'm kind of disappointed with it. But after hearing what you're saying, I think there's much more we agree on than not. It's
Yeah.
just, I just, I am a bit more of a black and white guy, and I know that there are some strengths in that and there are some weaknesses to it. And I just personally feel that this is one that, it concerns me that it's kind of overlooked and it's okay, because, it could lead to a lot of trouble further than if the thing is, it's like these little things, these little acceptances, like give them an inch and they'll take a mile. That's what, you give an inch and then you give another inch. And it's like, well, yeah, but we were able to close down the Trump, because he was talking bollocks. And then there was this example that was legitimately bollocks and this example. So therefore we can start to do it more and more. And then that's when it becomes dangerous. It will, much further down the road, compounded over time and future examples, it can become really dangerous. So, and I don't think it would. I don't think ultimately it would stop everyone, because like you said, there are so many businesses that can do that. We can choose to not go there and we can go here instead. We know we can do that. But as a media outlet, I just think it was a very dangerous step that they took there.
Yeah, I think where I'm for that to, I think the one thing that I struggle with in, I guess, as an overview, is to make sure what you've said happens. You then have to have the government impose itself on these organizations, controlling their freedom of editorial speech for how they broadcast something, and that's also the slippery slope. It's like, okay, well, how much government involvement, how much editorial control does the government have? And in Western society, none. They should have no editorial control. So that slippery slope is two ways. And where I see, do I have access? Did every one of those news organizations publish every word he said? Yes. They didn't censor a single word he said. They just chose how they presented that. And there is an argument to be made that they're presenting it in a way that suits their narrative. Yeah. It's not easy. And I think I think we agree on largely people need to be shown to be a fool. And I think one thing that does help in this case, and even if let's say Fox News as an example, they cut him off at a certain point, and he was well into his comments. I think he was a good 10 or 15 minutes in before they cut him off. It just got gratuitously bad. But even in those 10 to 15 minutes, we now have a record of him saying stupid shit. And it's now on record that this shit he said is stupid. And those news agencies then, they then censor that, not censor that shit. They fact check that shit. So they are able to give their, okay, so this is what you need to know about it. But you've got that on record now. If he doesn't say that stuff, you can't pick him apart for being an idiot. So there's a massive piece with that we want to make sure we don't lose. We want people's racism and bigotry to be highlighted so that we can say, yeah, you are racist and bigot.
Exactly.
And we shouldn't be afraid of it. And we should raise our kids to not be afraid to hear, we shouldn't be afraid that our kids are hearing shit that's negative, as long as we're on top of it. And we're educating them. Now, we're both not parents, so it's difficult for us to have a strong, But it's I really enjoyed this conversation because it's helping me form my opinions, actually. And I find as much as we agree, the more we talk through these issues, I think we are very different in many ways in how we view issues sometimes.
Yeah, we are. I think we've got we have a lot. There's always a core of commonality, I think, between you and I, and there just seems to be some slight nuanced differences when we go down the road of some of these issues. But I always enjoy these conversations, which is kind of why we've done this whole thing in the first place. It's just great talking this through with someone that's open-minded as well to the other side, and it isn't. Our friendship is zero impacted by this, and that's what I love. It's very freeing, isn't it? Like to be in and to trust someone enough that you have these conversations like, I really don't agree with you, mate, and here's why, and then hearing, well, this is why I don't think like that, and I wish there was just more of an environment where people could do that, because I think it's really healthy for both of us. Likewise, mate, you've made me think about certain things as well on those points, and I think it's really healthy to kind of get that, and to have that environment where you can just be honest without worry about the repercussion, and to be open enough to hear the other side, the counter, and to give that some consideration.
Yeah, this has been my favorite political. I find that when I watch stuff, I want to communicate, and Nick and I actually we've gotten quite good about. So my wife and I've gotten quite good about talking about political things, and we are very different in how we view the political spectrum. I think Nick is probably a bit more in tune with your point of view.
I would guess that as well. Yeah.
So I mean, you know, you guys both have a lot to learn from me, which is good. I mean, I think there's definite positives. Sorry, I had to. I couldn't say that to her. I would.
It was there, but it's phone up. But you just had, yeah.
But it's this has been what I've enjoyed about this is it's been a very organic conversation, and for me, we've gone into that conversation without having necessarily a direct point of view, and this is where I get a bit when we talk slippery slope again. You've even highlighted the point on why I don't like to necessarily talk about things that I'm not overly educated on. You know, when you mentioned earlier that quote where you shouldn't talk on something unless you know the counter argument. What?
Charlie Munger's, he's basically saying that don't express an opinion unless you've got a stronger counter argument to it.
And I think that's where I sit when it comes to, you know, the more we start using these platforms, the more we start speaking on YouTube or Twitter, which we're advertising on the Periscope right now. We're broadcasting on to Periscope right now. I think this type of conversation is great because it's more of an exploratory conversation where we have the freedom to be wrong. It's sort of what Joe Rogan was saying about that. You know, I change my mind from minute to minute, and we're exploring these concepts out loud. And there's freedom to do that. And
you're working it out.
Where I think when I looked at a lot of the content that I wanted to provide, and I want to start doing more recorded videos where I can get my point out more in I debate on this because I want to do more recorded videos for this forum. A little bit more lighthearted, but I want to do a little bit more editorial on my views. I don't think there's anything wrong with editorial. I debated a bit with Social Dilemma. But I sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think a space for both, because you can, you know, we've been speaking now. It might not come. Well, it's live. It's an hour and 40. Do people need to sit there and listen to an hour and 40 to get the meat of what we're saying? No, you could probably get it in at least half of that, like, or maybe 20 minutes. You know, and you could. So I think there's space and power for that, because an hour and 40 would put off a lot of people. But if you edit it to a point where it's digestible in 10, 20-minute chunks, people will get through that and they'll really get the meat of it. They'll get that kind of 80-20. So, however, if you just go on a circuit of editing and trying to make 10 to 20-minute clips, then you miss the whole process of what we went through,
context
organically trying and working it out as we go. There's, like you say, you need the space to be wrong, and you need the space to explore and to find and push and see where we're sitting and to form your opinion. And I think they're both. I think it's really important to have both.
I think when I look to do, because that's something I want to do with this channel that I haven't discussed with you over the last month. I've really been looking at content and how it's delivered, and how it's starting to script things more. I'm starting to see how a lot of people, that when they present ideas, it's not that they're that amazing or that much better than I am at presenting an idea. I think I'm actually, but it's scripted as well. They're getting their thoughts down on paper. And when I had this thought this week, when I look at how I communicate at work, within my company, I am the complaints officer, for lack of a better term. I am the person who deals with all the challenging communication pieces. Our marketing department comes to me. I manage my team. They come to me when they need to know how we message something. So how I deliver an idea or a message is very good. That is my skill set in this world, is delivering concepts in a very easily digestible form that is balanced. But when I stand up there and talk freely, I sound like a bag of shit. And I think what I want to do is confirmed. It's recorded. I want to start getting my ideas down in a scripted format. But what's changed from Social Dilemma is the method with which I do it. And the conversation and speaking to you has helped me out, because some of your views are forming how I want to manage things moving forward. And the way that I present this information is going to be in a manner that's, of course, it's going to be balanced, but the way I'm going to present it isn't going to be from the perspective of an expert, but somebody who's asking questions and seeking out information from others. So why isn't this question being asked? And here's what this looks like to me, as opposed to here's what you should think.
Okay. Yeah. So more of an exploratory kind of setup rather than this is the right and wrongs of X, Y, and Z.
because that stopped me from making videos before, because I'm not an expert on, let's say, I'm not an expert on, let's just say, voter fraud, for example. I've actually learned quite a lot about it. But let's say in the past, when we take a look at certain decisions politically that I've wanted to comment on, I've not gone about that, because now I'm thinking I'm not the arbiter of truth here, and I don't know enough to add value to somebody, because my opinion isn't necessarily well informed. That doesn't mean that I can't create content that raises questions in a manner that can present my uninformed point of view in an exploratory manner. And I think that's this all sounds very boring waffle, but it's the social dilemmas really help me sort of inform how I can get myself out there and get more positive interactions out there. So I'm going to edit all that shit out before then. And this is part of what I'm talking about, because I listen to myself just struggling to come up with the idea. If I sat down and articulated that on paper, it would just be, 4 sentences as opposed to 5 minutes of you trying not to shoot yourself in the head. Listen to me work through it.
Yeah, but mate, I think that's just the process, right? It's like, you have a look at a news article. It's like it brilliantly written in, 1,000 words or 500 words or whatever it is. And how many words do they actually write? It'd be multiple thousands, and it'd be edited to crap and brought down. And that's, to have one go at writing your 200, 500 words, whatever it is, it's so difficult to do that. And this is a process. And I would back you, I think, again, this is probably another discussion, mate, but you've said on numerous occasions that I'm not educated enough to kind of explain a certain topic that we're doing about. I'm not educated enough in that area. I think everyone can put their opinion across, and in some ways, putting your opinion across, like we've talked about just a moment ago, we should be able to have spaces where we can do that, just to form it. Like, I can express my opinion and be wrong, and that's fine. Like I am, and that's okay. And that we don't have to be always trying to help people or be right. That actually just me communicating out and being in front of a camera and recorded is a way of me working it out. And that, I can go back and be, do you know what? I made a mess of that. And do you know what? I'm going to be better for that next time. It's like, I can only release a book when I'm a good writer. No, like, release it where you are now. And that the whole point that you're doing that is a stepping stone towards you becoming a better writer. So I think, ultimately, what you were explaining from where you want to take the channel and how you'd like to create more, I think is brilliant. And the fact that most of us should be in a position, like, most people aren't experts, and that most of us should be coming from a more open perspective. And here are my views, and here's why. But let me ask these questions, and these are some answers that I haven't quite formulated yet. What are your thoughts? I think that's a really important point to come from. But a lot of people do come out. The reason I think you form that opinion is because a lot of people speak factually about stuff that they don't understand fully, and is way more nuanced. And so you're right to highlight that point, Shawn. But I think that you'd be taking away from society by not putting yourself out. You need to, in a way, back yourself more to, make a mistake and share your opinions. I think you have a huge amount to offer from that, and you'll gain your opinion from the whole process. But I understand where you're coming from, because I think that people do just blurt out what they think is fact, and it's not that well thought out. So I'm kind of like, I know you don't need encouragement from me, and that you would do it anyway. But I just wanted to kind of share my view on that.
Yeah, part of the process that we're undergoing is we're at a very early stage, and we're still learning what our style and what our craft is. And I think this very much what we've done here, it's for me been probably one of my favorite videos, because we've, in a very, I think, positive way, we've been able to explore a very challenging issue. And I think even if we haven't answered questions, we've raised questions that people should be asking on both sides of a conversation. And I like to see, I still want to be doing our fun reviews. That's not going anywhere. I really enjoy doing our vintage reviews, our TV show reviews, but I also want to be looking at things like TED Talks, maybe. I like the fact that we went in advance. We looked into an issue that was presented in a referenceable format, and we discussed it. And it gave us a framework that we both could work off of. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah,
I would say that I just think the life is about work hard, play hard, and that we should be able to talk about and tackle things that are really difficult that most people don't, and have the courage to do that. and really show how you can have opposing views about something, and really, just try and demonstrate to other people how we think communication should be done. But I also think the kind of review side of it is really important too, because life's too fucking short, and you can get so stuffy about something. There's chunks about what we've talked about today that really won't mean that much, and the whole grand scheme of things, and we should lighten up a little bit and have a little bit of fun with it as well, and that there's a balance to be had. But if I'm being honest, where I'm sat from, Shawn, I think I get more from these. I feel like we're stronger in this realm. I think we've probably got more to offer as well, if I'm being honest. I think, and don't get me wrong, I personally, selfishly, enjoy the reviews, but I feel it's more of a selfish thing that I get from it rather than me offering value. Whilst I think that I don't think we're experts in any of this, but I think where we do offer value is that the way in which we approach it and our openness and the way we communicate. And I think that we could be talking a lot of bollocks, and we do, but because of what I've just said, the way in which we say it, we're open, and the level in which we communicate, I think there's a lot to be had from that. And I think I'm probably a little bit more stimulated by that.
Well, I agree, and that's I think I want to look at the vintage reviews as something that we do as just sort of like a fun little treat from time to time.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think where I struggled with this sort of content before is we would just open up a issue. We just say, let's talk about this. And we're then trying to find some context where we can comment or something. And I think in this example, using the social dilemma as something that people popularly know and can reference, we can sit down and we can watch it in advance. And I think that has added so much value to this conversation, because we had somebody challenging ideas and thoughts out loud. And now we have a framework to build off of and to add value to or detract from, if that's the case, if we have opposing viewpoints. So I think definitely we've got, I feel like that's another direction we can look to go, is finding TED Talks or even podcasts that, had somebody on, like the Game Changers one, which we never officially did that, did we?
We just talked about it and left it. And again, I think this is an off-air comment, but it would only be wrong of us to do that. I think our audience knows that we're unprofessional enough to talk about this shit, but that's why I think we're missing out. I think we absolutely should be hitting things as soon as they come out, and when the social dilemmas hitting the ground a couple of months ago, that's when we should be talking about it, because I think that it will gain more traction then. And not that we're wrong for doing it now, but I just think that we should try and have our pulse to the ground a little bit when there are these things that are coming out, whether it's a TED Talk or a documentary or whatever it is. Yeah, I agree.
Find a subject that's key. So because there's not always going to be a documentary out there. If we would have rewound 4 years ago, we could have watched the Making of a Murderer series or whatever, Making a Murderer series, which is absolutely incredible. And we could watch that, and then that could be something that we can, let's have a show on Making a Murderer. Let's talk about the commentary, and that would be a good framework for the the criminal justice system. And now the thing I like about the social dilemma first is we've built a framework now that we can work off of, and understanding how media works and understanding how biases work. And we can use that framework and how we inform our decisions for other commentary pieces that we do in the future. But I also think it's important that we stick to some of the fun-loving
definitely.
And we spoke about this off air. If you end up watching the U.S. Office, I think we need to have a debate, because you're going to be on the wrong side of history if we did. I would expect, generally speaking, just if we look at the history when we debate, I tend to be the one that ends up on top, and you get a lot of value out of it. And I'm just kidding. So the UK, I think I'd love to see your opinion watching the UK and US Office. I need to watch more than one episode of the UK Office. I think there's room for us to have a proper conversation on which one was better,
Yeah, go on.
Let's say who's better, Michael Scott or David Brent. That to me seems like a fun conversation to have from a Britain American standpoint.
It does, and here's my honest reaction to it. I don't care about it enough to do it. I feel like I can't really be that bothered to I would watch it. It's not like I'm strongly against it. It's just I don't hear that and be like, yeah, I'm not revved up to do that. And I feel like probably won't happen or anytime soon. I feel like I want to comment.
that
Sorry?
type of content anyway, we still can do.
Yeah, but as a general rule, I mean, I'm definitely open to that, mate. And I think that the kind of fun review shows we should absolutely try and keep going.
Yeah.
But I think it's like the thing is with that Office one, it's like a slight fun, slight serious one. In that, I think to do it justice, you need to watch multiple. Like it's never, you can't watch a couple of series of something and then watch one episode of a
100%.
different flavor and like give that an honest, fair assessment. But because we're both, it would be interesting that we're both coming from opposing views, though. That I've watched all of the UK, you watch all of the US, and that kind of debate that. But I think, going back to Charlie Munger's point, I think to really do that justice, I would need to watch all of the US, and you would need to watch all of the UK for us to come to the table and give that, its full pennies. And then it's almost not like a fun thing then.
I would, if you ever do watch the U.S. Office, I'd be curious to have this sort of planning conversation again and see if you have a different opinion or not.
Well, I will let you know. You'll be the first to know when we get to that.
But I'm not going to pressure you to watch it.
And I think that's another thing in that as well, isn't there? Like, and I've probably done that with the Social Dilemma and Game Changers. Like, I spoke to you about it, and it was like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. And then you've got other things on your plate, and I'm not in the mood for watching something serious or whatever it is. I want to leave you with something, mate, because a series I've been watching on Netflix. Oh, I think I might have mentioned it. Schitt's Creek. Did I say that before?
Yeah, actually, that's something that my wife and I definitely are on top of. My wife and I are definitely on top. I mentioned it to Nick, and she said, "Yeah, I would be interested in watching." Yeah,
I thought I did. We're on, I think, season 3 now, and just loving how, I don't know. It's just lovely watching TV. It's got a lovely concept to it. It's feel good. It's silly. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. But it's like, there are some interesting points that come off the back of it as well. All those good series, you think like Parks and Recreation or The Office, there's like, it's fucking ridiculous. It's unbelievable. It's stupid. It's silly, but there's this little environment and you fall in love with it and you kind of half want to be there too. And there is this underlying theme that's actually, there's huge, like there's life lessons and morals and stuff you can learn from it as well. And like, that's where I think great TV is.
Yeah. Well, we have it on, we've actually saved the because it's on Netflix, I believe.
That's right, mate. Yeah, it did take me a couple of episodes. I'll say that I wasn't sure about it. There was things that frustrated me, but then we gave it a little bit of space, and I think at episode 3 I started to then really get into it, and then I now love it.
That was the show. There was one show that was like that I stuck with, and it turned out to be one of my favorite shows. Is Peaky Blinders. That was a show that was a slow burn, and it's, I think, as far as dramatic TV series, it is the coolest. Dramatic,
very cool. Yeah, it's very.
It is so cool. Just everything about it. It's almost like it reminds me, and this is a very loose analogy, but Ocean's 11 in a way. In that Ocean's 11, Ocean's 11 is slightly different because you didn't want to like Ocean's 11 as a film because they got all these amazing Hollywood actors that are just very, Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Matt Damon, and then you watch it and you're like, yeah, it was pretty good actually. That was just very cool. The music, the color, the direction, everything about it was just cool. And when you watch Peaky Blinders, just with the music, the modern sort of rock music and the slow motion, very sort of male-driven slow motion walking scenes. Yeah, very, but in a very cliche way. But even though it was done in sort of a cliche way, you just buy into it.
Yeah,
I know
what you mean.
Right into it.
Yeah,
but it shows that sometimes you need to stick with shows a few episodes, and they could be incredible.
Definitely, mate. I second that.
So where are we going from here next week?
I'm open, mate. I'm happy. Yeah, I say personally, I'm happy to jump on and talk about what we talk about. I think our better shows are when we bring something to the table, even if it's like the Social Dilemma, which we probably only spoke about a fraction of in the 2 hours. We haven't really given that a full review, but we've used it as a leveraging point to have some great conversation off the back of. So I do love that. So I think having something is better than nothing. I don't know what that something is. Have you got any thoughts, mate?
I think we need to leave it to ourselves and the viewers. Maybe if we just keep advertising, if somebody wants us to check something out, watch it, and talk about it,
I'd
I
love
think
that,
that
though.
would be
I'd really
that would be a
enjoy
great
that.
way forward. I think we need to
Yeah.
discover what that is this week at some point. So over the next few days, we need to decide that.
We need to agree on something that we will actually stick to and go through and get some feedback on whatever that is, and it might just be like an episode of Joe Rogan or something that comes up. So maybe we find that, but I think it would be useful to try and find something that would both be interested in, and I think watching it at the same time would be helpful as well. I think if I'd watched The Social Dilemma this week, that conversation would have gone on. I think I would personally would have kept driving it back because I would want there were so many things I wanted to talk about. So I think the timely nature and us both watching it, let's keep our ears to the ground and see what pops up.
Yeah, it's because it does get tired. I mean, carrying the show is hard work sometimes.
It must be, mate. Yeah. I do empathize with
that. So let's keep our head on a swivel this week and find something that's not, let's say, 12 episodes in a series, something that would be like a TED Talk or a YouTube video of some sort or something along those lines that's intriguing. And there may be some content that, we want to find something that people are thinking about right now. So I think our homework over the next 48 hours, either ourselves or our viewers, if they can provide us with something that they think we should be having a look at, and it's something that's going to have information, not just like a 3-minute news piece, something where somebody gives a point of view, some information, and food for thought for us to reflect on. That could be a conversation that we move down. And actually, there was something that I did see that I thought was quite good. I'm going to share it with you, but it's about drug abuse and addiction and the criminal justice system.
Okay.
And I saw an interview with somebody. It was a long interview, and it touched me. Somebody who was arrested in Oregon for selling drugs to her friend who was killed, and she was I don't want to give it away, but she was discussing whether drug use should be a criminal offense.
Okay.
So challenging that medium.
Is this a documentary or like a news clip or?
It was an interview. I don't know if it's going to be right. I don't know.
Well, let's put it that way. We have nothing else on our list right now, so we can put that down there, and we will consider we've got a couple of days to try and figure something out. I think you're right. We not leave it till the end of the week, but let's see if something better comes up, and if not, we'll tackle this.
Yeah, I've got the video here. I'm just going to send you the link on WhatsApp.
In the flurry of other 20.
And if you want to have a look at that, tell me what you think. It's only 8 minutes long, but I could see that giving us 1 hour of talking time quite easily. So I'll send that across to you, but we don't have to stick to that. But it's an idea I'd like to talk about at some point, because my views on whether, on how drugs should be managed as far as whether it's a criminal offense or not, I've changed my views on that in the last year substantially.
Okay. I think that would be a brilliant conversation. I could riff on it for an hour now, but it would be interesting to hear that as a platform to kind of get us going. So let's use that as our default for next week, and then as and when something else comes up, we can then pack it on for the week after. Yeah,
I think we could even look to do a cheeky little review in the next couple of weeks as well.
Yeah.
So, to everybody who's stuck around, I'm going to break this down into bits, but if you've watched the whole thing, thank you very much. So just want to make sure you know where to find us. That's key. So on Twitter and Periscope, you can find us on Bearded Philoso 1. I'll make sure I share this. On Facebook, Bearded Philosophy, and Instagram, we've done a lot of work in the background over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and it's getting there. It's just really close.
It's about any minute.
I can't stress how close it is to really us unleashing this platform on the world. So you do. I mean, there's no content there, but really, this is where you get in on phase one. If you're buying a house in phase one, that's where you get the most value out of it, and you want to be there.
Yeah.
So Huw, well, thank you so much, Huw. I really enjoyed this week.
Likewise,
and we will catch up with you next Sunday.
Yeah, you take it easy, mate.
All right, mate. We'll catch you soon. Take care.
See ya.